Hello students, this is Mr. Chance and this is Latin video 3 where we're going to look at some basic translations, or more specifically what you need to do to translate some simple Latin sentences into English. Okay? So if you've done Latin lessons 1 and 2, you already have started to build some Latin vocabulary focusing on some nouns, such as discipulus for student, or femina for woman, or monstrum for monster. Okay? We're still using those words, but what we're going to do now is we're going to throw in one verb and some adjectives. So while we're doing this, there are some things that you need to keep in mind. Okay, so some key points that will help make this easier for you. And let me get those key points up here. This is the way it's going to work. You ready? Good. Here we go. Boop. Oh, it didn't work. Clicked the wrong thing. There we go. All right, now let me edit this a little bit. All right, and then I'm going to edit this a little bit more. All right, so here are four key points, and we're going to look at those examples in a moment. Okay, first key point that I want you to remember is that Latin sentences often, not always, but often have a different word order than English sentences. Okay, and this is something to remember when you're translating the Latin into English. Some of the time you're going to have to rearrange the words in order for them to make sense in English. All right, so remember that, please. Also, important point number 2, Latin has no words for a, an, or the. Latin language does not have articles. So when we're translating Latin into English, we often have to add the articles to our sentences. Otherwise, they don't sound right when they're read. Okay. Next, Latin adjectives must agree with their nouns in number and case. So unlike English, most of the time at least, there are a few exceptions, Latin adjectives are either singular or plural. Okay, depending on the noun that they're attached to. And there's a difference in Latin between, say, an adjective that is part of the subject, meaning it's in nominative case, or an adjective that is part of a direct object, which would mean it is the accusative case. Now, for simplicity's sake, all of the adjectives you're going to be looking at in this lesson and the next lesson are all singular. They're all nominative. In other words, all of these adjectives are subject complements. They're adjectives that come after a linking verb and they describe the subject. Okay, so let's look at a few examples. Before we move on. All right, so let me get this set up now. Okay, so here are my examples for point 2, right? So key point 2. All right, 3 sentences. First sentence, discipulus est studiosus. Second sentence, femina est modesta. And third sentence, monstrum est rubrum. Okay. Now, in most cases, the adjectives are going to be a lot like their English counterparts. So that will help with the translations. And also note point 4, key point 4, the verb est means is, est. And it's singular present tense. In the present tense, just like in English, Latin distinguishes between singular subjects and plural subjects. And we'll look at some examples of that in a moment as well. Okay, so now when I translate, let's say I'm going to translate discipulus est studiosus from Latin into English. If I just do a one-for-one translation, I was starting to type in Latin. What I get is student is studious, or student is, oh, not jarred, hard working, right? Either one works, okay? Studious is a more literal translation because that's where we get the word studious from, is from the Latin adjective studiosus, right? But hardworking is a definitional kind of translation. Either one's fine, okay? Now, student is hardworking doesn't work for an English sentence, all right? And this goes to key point number 2. Key point number 2. Oops. The student is hardworking. That makes sense in English, all right? When we move to my next sentence, one-for-one correspondence, I get woman is modest. Again, not a good English sentence. The woman is modest. Or I could put a woman is modest. I mean, either one, really, right? Now here, I think for the first 2 adjectives, studiosus and modesta, the translations into English are fairly obvious. Then we get to rubrum. It's a little bit more difficult. The correspondence, it doesn't quite work here, right? But I still have monster is. And then I know, because I've done this before, that rubrum is red, right? So in Latin, the monster is red. Okay. Now, notice what's happening here, please. Discipulus is masculine, nominative, singular. This adjective is masculine, nominative, singular. This adjective is feminine, nominative, singular. This adjective is also feminine, nominative, singular. Wow, I zoned out. That was embarrassing. And then this monstrum is neuter, singular, nominative. The adjective is neuter, singular, nominative. All right. Now, if I were to switch these adjectives up a little bit in Latin, switch them up a little bit in Latin, the sentences are going to change. So let's look at that real quick. Let's say that the student is red. I don't know why the student would be red, but let's say he is, right? So that would be discipulus est ruber. And this is a confusing thing. The adjective, the Latin adjective for red is irregular. It doesn't quite follow the rules. It's one of the reasons I'm introducing it now. So in the singular masculine nominative, it's ruber, right? If the woman were hardworking, right, we would have femina est, not studiosus, but studiosa, feminine ending. And then here, if the monster were modest, we have monstrum est modestum. Okay, so most of the time, the ending of the adjective and the ending of the nouns are going to match, right? Most of the time. There are exceptions, right? But most of the time. For now, I think you'll be able to get at least most of these right by paying attention to this. Okay. Now let's look at key point 4 in a little more detail as well, on this distinction between singular and plural verbs. Singular and plural verbs. So this is key point 4. Key point 4. Very good. And I'm going to throw up some sentences here. And we'll hope they will all fit on the screen. If they don't, I'll move them around a little bit. Okay, they're not all quite going to fit on the screen rather, but that's okay. I can shift them slightly to make them fit because I'm clever that way. All right, outstanding. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, boom. All right, notice please the difference between these sentences, right? A singular subject like student takes the singular linking verb is. If I change it to students, I have to change the verb to are. Now in English, the adjective doesn't usually change between singular and plural, okay? In Latin, the adjective would change as well. It would no longer be discipulus, it would no longer be est, it would no longer be studiosus, Right now, you don't need to worry about the plural forms because the next two lessons that you're working on that come out of this video, you're not bothering with plurals. We'll get to them, but not just yet. Okay, so if you've come this far and you're interested in doing the extra credit that comes out of this video, right? Oh, that's hard to see. I just that's kind of light. Let's go. There we go. So your extra credit assignments, which are in resources, right, are Latina 3 and Latina 4. Both of them are basic translations like we're doing here in this video. If you have any questions about these, feel free to ask me. If I have time or whatever, I'm more than happy to answer questions. Thank you. Have fun.